Famous basketball coach John Wooden once said, "Don't mistake activity for achievement." And so when we think of business or really anything in life, we want to take a very similar lens. What action is productive? What action yields achievement? And what action yields neither of those? So today we want to talk about the concept of active procrastination, things that feel like work but don't necessarily yield results or productivity. We say this purely out of our own experience and over many, many years of trying to optimize efficiencies, both personally myself as well as our firm. But three things you want to avoid that I call, or I'm sure it's more broadly defined somewhere else as, active procrastination. The first of these is content. Now, you can read all the books in the world, you can watch all the YouTube videos in the world, you can listen to all the podcasts in the world, but if all of that consumption and digestion of information never yields action, then it is procrastination. Sometimes the thought of doing the work, the thought of jumping into the fray of doing that exciting, very difficult thing is more exciting than the lonely days, months, and years of actually doing it before it yields a result. And so sometimes people get caught up in this hyper learning scale of something. And if you really think about it, most of the world was built and conquered by people that had very limited access to information. We now have the Library of Alexandria in our pocket at all times, and that can sometimes lead to a bit of analysis paralysis, for lack of a better phrasing. And so we always say, act just as much as you consume. And so if you spend 2 hours reading things, spend 2 hours doing things. You'll find that as this ratio is more to a 1-to-1 scale, it's impossible for productivity not to improve. Second is junk food. And so I always think of this from the perspective of on a Friday night after a long week of work, before starting or planning for Saturday's work, I'd get a box of ice cream and sit at home and think of things that I was going to do, right? And so that's obviously the literal sense, but the idea of that consuming or doing something bad to some lesser degree is going to get a better outcome. And so whether it's that, sitting at a bar on a Friday and having a few drinks, and it's not that these things can't be social and productive, but should not be construed or misconstrued with work. If you can sit there and think about something, you can do it just the same with or without 4 Big Macs in front of you. And so when you say junk food, we think of it more broadly. It could be food, it could be, social activities, it could be consuming content that's irrelevant or not going to be productive. But at the end of the day, focus needs to be focused. And as much as we all like to think we can multitask, I haven't found a situation where we actually can. So 100% focus on anything is always going to yield a better result. Lastly, something we call side quests. So anyone who's played video games in the 80s and 90s would remember that if you were in the RPG game and you were going for the main quest of saving the princess or whatever it may be, there was all these little side quests along the way, returning some lost item to someone in the village or whatever it might be, battling some person on the ancillary or something. And we see that in business sometimes, is that ultimately business hits certain constraint points, certain challenge points. And when that's the case, it takes some time to plow through that. And oftentimes, as people are kind of navigating, are there ways to go around that? There's always these shiny new objects of, oh, well, this could be an interesting side business, or, oh, we could take this kind of path here as well and do these two things. And what ultimately happens is you see businesses kind of grow these appendages sometimes of either non-related or non-complementary things, because what happened is the main thing hit a certain pain point and there wasn't a resolution found to it. And so when you look at a business and say all the different things that a business does, you can kind of see these recurring constraint points or pain points. And just like travelers in the desert or spun around for 40 years for a walk that could have taken 3 weeks, you see the same thing with business sometimes. And so ultimately, each of these new iterations or new ideas in the business will hit a similar constraint point at a certain juncture. And so you're just repeating the not easier, but perhaps more fun activities until you hit that hard thing. But until you actually prevail over that hard thing, everything you do is always going to get stuck at that same point. And so what do all three of these things really synthesize down to, or what is kind of the directive? From our perspective, it's just doing the hard thing. And so whether it's writing that email we didn't want to write, whether it's having that difficult discussion that we didn't want to have, whether it's making that decision that's not going to be popular with certain people but is necessary, Those are the only things that are going to stop the procrastination. And it's a muscle, just like anything else. And as you have more of these hard things, and as your stomach turns and twists more trying to accomplish some of these things, then the next time you do, it's going to be a little easier and a little easier. We always say yesterday's difficult is today's normal, is tomorrow's easy. And so if you keep pushing that forward, you'll be amazed over a certain amount of time, at least we've seen with our own experience, of what you're capable of accomplishing without any level of discomfort and without any procrastination. So that's the idea. Avoid active procrastination. Avoid the overconsumption of content. Avoid junk food in all forms that you possibly can. And avoid side quests when it's distracting from the actual progress sought to be made. So don't mistake activity for achievement. Do the things that get the results over and over and over. They only get easier or a little less painful every time. I hope the week continues to go well for everyone. Keep pushing forward. God bless. See you for next time.